G'day, Chris here, and Masters of the Universe is on everybody's minds, which is very exciting. I was fortunate enough to see the premiere a week before it opened here in Perth, Western Australia, the city where I live, and you can catch my video in spoiler-free review all about that awesome film on my other channel, G'day Geeks. I'll link it to at the end of the video. But I just thought now's a good time to go through the original DC Comics Masters of the Universe comics. So they actually published 3 issues, which I thought I'd dust off since Masters of the Universe is now in pop culture awareness. I'm very excited. The movie was fantastic. Let's dive in. I have very fond memories of picking up the first issue in which He-Man appeared. Is DC Comics Presents number 47 from July 1982. That's where Superman and He-Man battle and meet for the first time. I picked that up as a child from a second-hand bookstore, and in fact I've still got that issue somewhere in my collection. And so shortly after that, in November of the same year, November 1982, when the toys were being released from Mattel, there was the special preview insert in a few titles from the November 1982, basically showing what the Masters of the Universe lore was and introducing the characters. So the insert was featured in quite a few issues of DC Comics November 1982 roster, and then finally in December of 1982 we got the 3-issue miniseries, which we are going to have a very brief look at right now. So this was the first 3-issue miniseries published by DC Comics, and obviously Masters of the Universe has been published by pretty much all of the main publishers ever since. Marvel, Dark Horse are currently publishing it. Image published it for a while in the 2000s, so it's always been on comic store shelves. All these 3 issues are written by Paul Kuperberg with art by George Tusker. Alfredo Akala, who did the original mini comics that were packaged with the Mattel toys, inks the first 2 issues, and Rodin Rodriguez does the final issue on inks. And one of the Kubert brothers, I noticed, actually does the lettering for, I think, this first issue. Adam Kubert did the lettering for the first issue. So it's pretty awesome. So there's something very charming about these 1980s comics. This was obviously just a 3-issue miniseries to be continued later after the success of the toys. And this is called To Tempt the Gods. It's pretty similar to what we recall from the lore the day. The original mini comics that were published were quite different. He-Man, there was no Prince Adam. He-Man was basically more of a wandering barbarian type, and some of that carries over into here. In fact, in the first issue we can see that King Randor and Queen Marlena look very different from the original Filmation cartoon that came out in 1983. So Motu, Masters of the Universe, still had that weird period in the early 80s where it was a bit more like Conan. In fact, some of the dialogue we can see in these issues is very Conan-esque. And a very early Thor kind of issues. It's got the these and the thous, and it's all very Shakespearean and very serious. Obviously the Filmation cartoon did away with all that kind of stuff. But there's quite a early darker fantasy charm to these. There's a lot more bloodthirsty and, you know, demons from hell and all these kind of insults. So yes, it's a lot more adult aware and less kid friendly, I guess, but pretty interesting to see how the lore has evolved over the years. The idea behind these 3 series is basically Skeletor wants the 2 halves of the Power Sword so he can open up Castle Grayskull, and if you remember the original Castle Grayskull toy, you would basically connect He-Man's and Skeletor's swords together, and you would insert them as a key to unlock the Castle Grayskull toy, the playset, which is pretty awesome. So that kind of carries on through this 3-issue miniseries, and there's 3 medallions that they have to find in order to get the Power Sword and then rescue the sorceress or the goddess. As I said, the mythology was still kind of nebulous, so Teela didn't really look like Teela. The sorceress or the goddess didn't really look like her, as we realize later on. But we have Zodak here, we have Man-E-Faces, we have Beastman, Stratos, and a very bloodthirsty Battle Cat all appear in here. But it's very charming, as I said, and it's pretty interesting to see how the Masters of the Universe franchise has evolved over the years. The letters pages on the final issue are pretty remarkable, and again you can see that's from the early days of Motu. In fact, one guy here from Dawson, Ricky Paul, he suggests As a possible plotline, Adam could fall immediately in love with Wonder Woman and follow her back to Earth, unintentionally leaving Eternia at the mercy of Skeletor. So yeah, I love that kind of stuff, but yes, obviously that didn't happen. But there we go, just the letter pages and the ads all just remind us of the 80s from DC Comics. As I said, Dark Horse Comics are currently publishing Master Universe comics. In fact, they've been doing that since 2021. Image Comics did it in the early 2000s, and Marvel also had a stab in the mid-80s, 1986 to 1988. If you're curious and want to grab all the mini comics and to see how the lore has changed, Dark Horse have been pumping out these wonderful hardcover collections. I think they're actually reprinting the He-Man and the Master of the Universe mini comic collection, which is a massive coffee table hardbound book. It's like over 1,200 pages. Yes, 1,200 pages. That includes all the mini comics over the years, and they had some great people working on that, like Bruce Timm, who we know from the Batman animated series from the 90s. So a lot of wonderful hands have written and drawn some of these Masters of the Universe comics. This is just a very brief video just to show some of the history of the original Masters of the Universe comics back from 1982, when their line was really just starting before it became a pop culture juggernaut as we know it today. But yes, I highly recommend watching the film if you haven't seen it already. It's definitely kid friendly. It's definitely friendly for nostalgic middle-aged people such as myself, and I hope you enjoy the film. So there's a very brief look at the original DC Comics 1982 Masters of the Universe miniseries. Thanks for watching all the way at the end, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.